An angry crowd yells, waves banners, and sways on a protest stage. The crowd is very loud. There is a flashlight on. Behind the curtain, Joan Baez stands still, holding her guitar. She isn't stopped out of fear or politics, but because of one name and one person on stage that she couldn't or wouldn't stand next to. Who could stop the campaign against the war from speaking out? Who could make Joan Baez, the protest singer saint, shut up? The world saw her as strong, beautiful, and invincible. But there was something much more human behind the angelic look. She felt betrayed, angry, and called many names that she never spoke out loud until now. There are 5 names, and each one brings up a painful memory that is too heavy to hold or bury. The boy with the guitar who turned into a god was the first one she thought of. He was the man who disappeared without a word and left her to drown in his quiet. Bob Dylan is the person who erased her. He was just a scruffy folk singer with a guitar and a dream before he became the face of an age. Joan Baez was the one who reached down and pulled him up into the light. She did more than just share her stage. She shared the spotlight, her reputation, and the people who followed her. She trusted him, spoke up for him, and loved him when not many people knew his name. She took what he said very seriously, like it was the Bible. Lines of worship that are supposed to make the world better. They were more than just lovers. They fought for a cause, marched together, and found artistic love. They marched, sang, and shook things up together. People still thought of him as a nobody when she stood by his side. However, as Dylan's fame grew, something dark and subtle changed. The quiet boy turned into someone who was harder to reach and colder. By 1965, he was hiding in hotel rooms with strangers and spies, while wearing dark sunglasses that looked like armor. He then took off on a world tour without telling her and left her name off the bill. No call, no message, just a cold, cruel silence that spoke louder than any song. Finally, Newport came along. It was the event that split the folk world in two. Dylan plugged in and went electric, which shocked people. For Joan, though, the real insult wasn't music. It was about them. With a scream and a look, he cut them off from each other while he played his new sound, which made everyone gasp. In appearances, he made fun of their past and laughed at her causes. He almost threw away their history like an old songline. He made their fight into a side note and their closeness into a joke. He saw it as show business. For her, it broke her heart. Bob Dylan wasn't just a broken heart. He took on the role of a symbol of deception. Proof that people who said they would change can actually give up. That not even the best writers can forget, who sang with them in the trenches and helped build the stage they now stand on their own. Dylan wasn't the only man who could turn peace into sadness, though. When he said the next name, his voice went up, but so did his pride. The guy who made fun of her on live TV. David Crosby and Laurel Canyon in the late 1960s. There was a lot of smoke, ambition, and change in the air. David Crosby sped through this electric world like a storm, while Joan Baez walked into it with style. At first he was mesmerizing, magnetic, and had sharp tones. He was also full of charm and defiance. His voice could make a room melt. His views could make people angry, but his charm was also sharp, and Joan would soon feel it. Crosby was known for more than just his duets. He also knew exactly how to hit people with his words. People loved his comments, which was often very dangerous. That was hard for Joan to learn. In 1970, Joan was going to sing a song for political prisoners at an anti-war event that was shown across the country and was seen by millions. It's soft and meant to inspire. Crosby stepped up before she could, grinning and not following a script. The smoke from his cigarette curled like the fuse of a bomb. He did not call her by name. He did not need to. He called out the artists who sang songs of peace from safe stages, while other people were hurt in the streets. People in the room laughed, but Joan didn't. Without moving, she knew that every eye in the room and every living room in America knew who he was talking about. It wasn't a scream. It was even worse. She felt like a knife was going through her beliefs, shaming the people in the guise of humor. She still got up on stage. She sang with calm, her voice steady and her eyes burning. But the wound opened, behind the scenes. She cried not because she was weak, but because she was so angry. The kind of anger that only happens when someone you thought was on your side turns their fire on you. The people thought Crosby was peace itself, but to Joan he was more dangerous. A man who dressed in revolutionary clothes just to get people to cheer. When the cameras came out, he quit being an activist. From then on, Joan made a quiet choice that she wouldn't change. There were no records, interviews, or stages that were shared with David Crosby. Now it wasn't because she was afraid of what he might say, but because she didn't think it meant anything. Because protesting in a real way takes more than just shouting. It calls for honesty. No matter how beautiful a voice is, it rings hollow when it makes fun of the people who paved the way. But the next time someone betrayed them, there was no smoke and cameras. It came right in front of a loud crowd. It wasn't about music this time. It was about hate, pride, and a movement that ate its own young people. The rebel who made fun of her kindness. John Rubin. Jerry Rubin did more than just make noise in the late 1960s. He made the noise. A firebrand in a suit jacket. Clenched, arms, megaphone in one hand, and manifestos in the other. He didn't just lead marches, he set them on fire. His talks shook up college campuses. His name was all over the news, in FBI files and on protest flyers. A lot of people saw him as a sign of defiance. At least at first he was exciting, daring, and unapologetic bold to Joan Baez. He was a revolutionary in the making. But it didn't take her long to figure out what the words really meant. Because not every revolt starts with the truth. Some of them are held together by ego, act, and show. In 1969, Joan stood backstage tuning her guitar while a huge anti-war protest took place in Chicago. Her heart beat for a reason. She was going to sing for peace, to hit a crowd with music that makes them hopeless. But Rubin rushed the mic before she could speak. Then he attacked in front of thousands of people. He did not call her by name. He didn't need to. He made fun of musicians who played guitars while real rebels killed people. People in the crowd yelled, laughed, and cheered. For Rubin, it was a play, a chance to take center stage. Joan saw it as treachery. It was rude, public, and embarrassing. Her fingers got stiff and her throat got tight. But she sang anyway, her voice steady and calm, even though she was very angry. She was furious behind the smile. Rubin didn't just make fun of her music. He also made fun of her kindness, making her activism nothing more than background noise. In his one-man movement, at that very moment, something changed inside her. He was easy for her to see for what he was, not a visionary, but someone who loves the attention. A man who wants praise more than change. She made a promise in her head that night. No more stages being shared. No more big gatherings next to each other. Don't act like his violence was brave any longer. Because Joan Baez thought that change without compassion wasn't brave. It was violence dressed up in a nicer outfit. It was action that looked like principle. Her next lie, though, didn't come through a speaker. It didn't make the streets shake. It got in through closed doors and whispered where words were meant to soothe. The genius who made her feel like she wasn't there. Back in 1978, two of the biggest names in music went into the same recording studio, Paul Simon and Joan Baez. It should have been important history, an event where stars meet. Two minds, two pasts, and two sounds that don't match. But instead of peace, stress that was hard to breathe in rose to the surface. It was clear, as soon as the tape started to roll. Paul Simon wasn't there to work with them. He was there to be in charge. Every take was like a fight, and the studio was like a battlefield. He cut Joan off in the middle of her note, looked over her words like a surgeon who wasn't given anesthesia, and brushed her feelings away with cold precision. Then there was the moment that turned the pain into destruction. He asked her to change the words to a song she had written after a terrible event in her life. A song that is full of pain, memories, and real feelings. A song that helped her feel better. He wanted to change it like it was just another line on the page. She had cracks in her voice and her fingers were curled up like a cover around the guitar. Every time she tried to add something to the conversation and move it back toward mutual respect, she was met with a shrug, a sigh, or a tight, passive-aggressive grin. It wasn't music after the third track. It was war without noise, and Joan didn't move even though she was hurt. After getting herself together, she stood up and left, not yelling or acting out, but quietly and with more class than the room called for. He didn't follow her or ask her to stay. He didn't even say goodbye. It said everything with its thick, deliberate, and final quiet. An old friend of Joan's would tell her, "I've stood with murderers of conscience. But Paul Simon made me feel like I wasn't there, even though I had sung through chaos, been arrested for peace, and been in the same room as power." She didn't see this cut coming. Because there was no fight, it was an eraser. It also didn't scream. It shut them up. Paul Simon hadn't just turned off her voice in that studio. He told her it didn't matter. That was a different kind of violence for Joan Baez. But not every hurt was caused by a man. The woman who made the cut had the same stage lights shining in her eyes, but there was no room in her shadow. Joni Mitchell, the rival who never said her name. They seemed like sisters in song to everyone else. Each had a guitar on her hip and a fiery voice. They were two icons and prophets of poetry and protest. Joan Baez and Joni Mitchell. They could have been so strong when they worked together, but what seemed like fate on stage never made it past the door to the dressing room. Because there was no harmony, duet, or friendship behind the story. There was no sound and a chill that wouldn't go away. Everything was clear when they met for the first time in 1968. Joan walked up to the stage backstage at an event with the grace she was known for, a smile and an open hand. And Joni didn't even look up from her drink. There was no feeling or interest, just a cool nod far away. After that, the real cut came. At a get-together of other artists, Joni laughed off Joan's voice as churchy. One word was meant to sound nice, but it cut like a breath meant to hurt. Joan was always calm and never spoke up in public, but the truth got through in her writing. She said Joni looked like frost in a silk dress. Beautiful, yes, but very cold. You admired their presence from afar but never dared to get close. What came next wasn't a debate. It took a long time to erase. There were no fights, no news stories, just space. There were no joint tributes, no invitations received, and no stage shared. They smiled big for the camera when they were taken, a picture together. But as soon as the flash went out, they turned away. It was not war. It was far away, planned, and icy. Fans thought it was a miracle that they missed. Two voices that shaped an age that will never be the same because of something they didn't say. For Joan, though, it was a line. It was always clear that Joni Mitchell was very smart, but the air around her always felt cold, full of ability but heavy with quiet condescension. Each word felt like it belonged. Every look was patient. When there isn't a link where one should have grown, the hurt is sometimes even worse than being betrayed. With a smile that never reached the eyes and silence that says yes to every request, Joan chose not to push it. She decided that there are times when silences shouldn't be broken because the biggest rejection is the one that doesn't have to be said. What do you think? Share your thoughts below.